My name is Jack Rawlins, 63 years old, a retired veteran with a bad left leg that still aches when the wind turns cold. I was once a Marine, once lay flat under the burning sand of Afghanistan, once watched my comrades take their last breath before they even had the chance to write their final letter home. Now, I live in a small wooden cabin on the edge of the Vermont forest. No one around, except for the occasional deer that wanders by, and Rusty, my hunting dog. My companion for the past 8 years. Rusty is a yellow Labrador, with kind eyes and a mouth that always seemed to carry a half smile, half frown, like he knew something about the world that we didn't. I adopted him during a brutal winter. He'd been discharged from a military rescue training program. They said he was too emotional, not fit for service. But I saw something else, loyalty, almost human. Honestly, he might be the only living being who truly understood me since I came back home. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m., brewed some black coffee, ate whatever was left over from the night before, threw on my old military coat, and walked into the forest with Rusty. We had our own hunting rhythm, not for sport, but for survival. I wasn't one of those officers with a cushy pension. Just a few $100 a month in veteran assistance. Deer, rabbit, wild turkey, those were the meals that filled my freezer through winter. That morning was like any other. The sun had barely risen, casting gold across the misty tree line. I walked slowly behind Rusty, who was sniffing the forest floor like a scout on duty. I carried my old rifle over my shoulder. We looked like two soldiers on patrol, one old, one on 4 legs, marching through silence. As we neared the Red Hill, an area where deer often gathered, Rusty froze. His ears perked. He sniffed once. Twice. Then gave a soft whine. Not danger, just alert. But something wasn't right. And then I heard it. Laughter. Music. Human voices, drifting through the trees from the far side of the ridge. I signaled Rusty to stay back. But he, ever curious, circled ahead. I followed him up a low slope, and that's when I saw them. A group of about 8 people, men and women, gathered around several shiny off-road vehicles. They wore expensive, spotless hunting gear. High-end rifles. Military-grade binoculars. I spotted a man wearing a Rolex that gleamed even under the forest shade. They were laughing, blasting music, using artificial bird calls, turning the forest into their private amusement park. Rusty barked, not aggressively, just loud. He wasn't charging, just alerting me. It was what he always did when there were people or animals nearby. And then, without warning, a gunshot rang out. No one called out. No one hesitated. Rusty dropped instantly. His head hit the dirt. His eyes widened, then dimmed. I couldn't even scream. My legs froze. My whole body went numb, then shattered. I ran to him, fell to my knees, and held his body. His blood soaked through my sleeves. I cradled him like something sacred, like a son. Because he was. Laughter erupted behind me. Damn mutt. Ruined our hunt, a male voice rang out. The Rolex guy. Oh, was it someone's pet? A woman sneered, dressed in white fur. How tragic. Is he yours, Grandpa? I stood, blood covering my hands and coat. My voice shook with rage. He was my friend. He was my family. The man in the Rolex raised an eyebrow, scoffing. Family? A dog? What kind of pathetic life are you living out here? I clenched my fists. I'm a U.S. Marine. I fought so people like you could stand in this forest without a bullet flying over your head. He laughed loudly. Well, thanks for your service, hero. But your time's up. This is public hunting land. That mutt wasn't on a leash. He ran wild, he got shot. Simple as that. I stared at him, really looked into his eyes. There was nothing. No guilt. No understanding. Just entitlement. I knelt again and gently lifted Rusty's body. He was heavy, but I carried him like something precious, something irreplaceable. I didn't say another word. I turned my back and walked away. Their laughter followed me for a few yards. But I didn't care. Because something inside me had changed. This wasn't over. I buried Rusty beneath the old pine tree behind my cabin. The hole wasn't deep, but I dug it with cracked hands and a heart full of weight. The cold earth clung to my fingers, the damp forest smell choking my throat. I laid him down gently, as if he were still breathing. On his chest, I placed my bronze star medal, something I'd tucked away in a drawer since the day I came home from war. Rusty deserved it more than I ever did. I sat beside his grave until the sky turned dark. The wood swallowed sound as the wind whistled through the branches like the sigh of something ancient. I didn't cry. Not a single tear. But I made a vow, to the earth, to the heavens, and to every brother I'd lost in battle, that Rusty's death would not be in vain. I knew who those people were. The arrogant faces, the polished smiles. One was the son of a real estate mogul. Another, the wife of a state bank executive. A few others, young, entitled, living off trust funds and daddy's lawyers. They rented the forest. They rented the guns. They even rented the illusion of power. And they thought there was nothing they couldn't buy, not even a life. Back in my cabin, I sat at the old wooden table and pulled out the metal lockbox beneath my bed. Inside were the remnants of a life once lived in uniform, faded photographs, a combat knife, a worn notebook, and a dusty satellite phone. I turned it on. Weak signal. But enough. I dialed a number I hadn't called in over 10 years. This is Jack. I need you. A pause. Then a voice, hoarse, older, but still familiar. Jack. My God. It's really you? Ethan. They killed Rusty. One shot. In cold blood. And they laughed. My voice cracked like dry branches. Silence. I'll be there. 24 hours. Don't do anything stupid. The next morning. Before the sun had even broken the horizon, I was ready. Not with weapons. I wasn't a soldier bent on revenge. But I had evidence. I had maps of the forest. I had the mind of a man who once led troops through hell and remembered every inch of terrain like a battlefield. I returned to the site where Rusty fell. His blood was still dark in the soil. I found a shell casing, .308 caliber, high-impact hunting round. Civilian rifle, military-grade force. I took pictures. Logged coordinates. I even had a recording, one of them saying, I thought it was a wolf. Who leaves a damn dog off a leash? I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because these people thrived under the illusion of control until they met someone who knew how to turn the law into a loaded gun. By noon, I heard it. Not a deer. Not some ATVs. The deep growl of military engines. The kind I used to hear on base. The kind that meant business. 3 Humvees tore through the forgotten logging trail, kicking up dust and pine needles. Their arrival sent birds scattering into the trees. From the lead vehicle stepped a tall figure in full military dress uniform. Sunglasses. Clean lines. Authority that walked like it owned the ground it stepped on. Ethan Morgan. Son of Paul Morgan, my best friend in the Corps. Paul died in my arms during an ambush. His last words. Promise me, if my boy ever needs help, you'll be there. I promised. And now, Ethan was no boy. He was a U.S. Army general, and he had come for me. Uncle Jack. He took off his glasses. His eyes shimmered with old memories. I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner. I nodded. No words necessary. Ethan turned to his men, elite units, clearly special ops. Alpha Team, locate the civilian hunting party in Sector Red Hill. Suspected wildlife violation, illegal discharge of weapon, and possible manslaughter. Move. Within minutes, the elite hunting club was surrounded. They were still drinking when it happened, laughing over a pile of deer carcasses, completely unaware that their world was about to implode. Voices rose. "We have permits. You can't do this. We're American citizens." Ethan approached, calm and unshaken. "I know exactly who you are," he said, staring down the man with the Rolex, now pale, his swagger evaporated. "You shot an animal registered to a military veteran. A trained, retired service dog. You didn't report the incident. You didn't offer aid. That's animal manslaughter, Class C felony under Vermont law." Rolex guy tried to argue, but Ethan raised a hand. One of the soldiers dropped a recorder on the table. The voice that played was unmistakable. "I thought it was a wolf." Checkmate. Ethan turned to address the group. "And furthermore, you mocked a decorated war veteran on public land. Under the 2022 Respect Our Veterans Act, such behavior is prosecutable." One woman burst into tears. Another man began shaking. These weren't hunters anymore. They were exposed cowards. That evening, Ethan and I sat by a fire in front of my cabin. He had changed out of his uniform, now in a simple shirt, just like he used to wear when he was 8, sitting on my lap, asking about battle stories I never wanted to tell. He sat in silence for a long time. Then finally said, "You know, when my dad died, I blamed you. For years, I thought you left him. I looked away. I couldn't save him. I tried." He nodded slowly. "I understand now. I've seen war. And today, when I saw you holding that dog, like he was your brother, I got it." I didn't respond. The fire crackled. The wind howled. Ethan stood, walked over to Rusty's grave, and knelt. He unpinned a silver star medal from his chest, his own, and placed it next to the wooden marker I had carved. Rusty, soldier. Brother. Hero. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Wealthy hunting party detained by U.S. military, veteran's dog killed, felony charges possible. The dog named Rusty who made a nation weep. Letters poured in. From veterans. From single mothers. From children who'd lost their own beloved pets. Everyone wrote the same thing. That dog was someone's whole world. But for me, Rusty wasn't just a dog. He was a comrade. A brother. The last thing in this world that reminded me I still had a heart that beat for something other than pain. And I know, somewhere out there, in a forest of his own, on a battlefield I'll one day join, Rusty is still barking, still warning, still watching. Letting me know. Everything's gonna be okay. It rained all week after that. Cold, heavy forest rain, like the sky itself was mourning Rusty alongside me. I kept to myself in the wooden cabin. Each morning, I made a cup of coffee and sat on the porch, looking down at the small grave where he lay. I still placed dog biscuits in his old metal bowl, knowing no one would eat them again. Some habits are harder to break than grief itself. The news about the incident had spread like wildfire across the nation. The public was outraged. Animal rights groups, veteran organizations, even people who had never owned a dog, they all stood with me. Not just with me, an old man in the woods, but with something greater, loyalty, decency, and justice that couldn't be bought. A week later, the local court called for a public hearing. The man who pulled the trigger, George W. Claymore III, showed up in a crisp designer suit, flanked by 2 lawyers. I sat in the front row, wearing my worn-out shirt, holding a picture of Rusty in the snow, stick in his mouth, ears perked up like he was still on duty. His lawyer argued. My client believed it was a wolf. In low-light conditions and a potentially dangerous environment, his response was a reflex rooted in self-defense. I stood, my voice rough but firm. Rusty once detected landmines in Fallujah. He saved 3 young soldiers from being blown apart. He never barked at an ally. But that day, he barked, not out of fear, but because he smelled lies. The courtroom went silent. A woman in the back began to cry. The judge, a fellow veteran who'd once served in Eastern Europe, tapped his gavel and said, "This case is not over, but I'll say this as a man, to take a life so callously, and then mock someone who gave everything for this country, is beyond forgivable, no matter how much money you have." George was sentenced to 5 years of probation, 18 months of mandatory rehabilitation service, and a $250,000 donation to the United States Warrior Animal Protection Fund, a new foundation that now bore Rusty's name at the top of its registry. Some said the punishment was light. Maybe. But for a man like him, being publicly disgraced and hated across the country was a deeper wound than prison. A month later, I got a call from the governor's office. They wanted to hold a public memorial for Rusty. I hesitated. I was never one for crowds. But Ethan said, "You're not going for the glory. You're going so Rusty can live forever." I nodded. The ceremony was held in a national park, surrounded by hundreds of veterans and animal lovers. Children in red scarves sang the national anthem, their small voices trembling with emotion. They unveiled a bronze statue of Rusty, standing tall, ears up, mouth open mid-bark. At the base, an inscription. Rusty, not just a dog. A soldier. A hero. I stared for a long time. Ethan stood beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "I just got word from the Pentagon," he whispered. "Rusty's being posthumously awarded the Medal of Military Valor, first time ever for a non-active service dog." I said nothing. Just looked at the statue, and felt something inside me finally lift. After the ceremony, a small boy, no older than 12, came up to me. Skinny, messy hair, stars in his eyes. "Mr. Jack, I don't have a dad. My mom said you're a hero. Can you tell me about Rusty?" I knelt beside him, taking his hand. Rusty wasn't a superhero. He just did what was right, even when it meant dying for it. That's what being brave means. Remember that. Being a man doesn't mean being strong. It means being honest. And standing up. He nodded, eyes bright. In that moment, I understood, Rusty wasn't gone. He lived on, in that boy's heart, in every story that would be told after, and the change he left behind. I returned to my cabin. The days rolled by slowly, like the first winds of winter. I woke early, cooked, walked through the woods. There were no more barks, no paw prints beside mine. But I still heard Rusty, in the wind, in the rustle of the leaves, in my own heartbeat. One afternoon, I received a package from the Department of Defense. Inside was a framed display containing Rusty's Medal of Military Valor, along with a handwritten letter from the Secretary. "Dear Veteran Jack Carter, we understand no medal can replace your loss. But today, this nation bows its head to honor Rusty, your loyal companion, and an enduring symbol of courage in our time." I hung the frame above a small altar in the cabin, next to Rusty's photo. Placing my hand gently on the glass, I whispered, "We did it, buddy." As the last leaves of fall tumbled from the trees, I decided it was time to turn the page. I wrote a letter to Ethan. "Ethan, I spent most of my life in silence. But thanks to you, and thanks to Rusty, I found the reason to speak, to stand, to believe that doing what's right still matters in this world." At the end, I added, "I'm opening a sanctuary. A place where veterans and service dogs, those who've fought and bled together, can find each other again for the next chapter of their lives." That winter, the snow came early. It blanketed the forest in white. I stood on the porch, cup of tea in hand, looking toward Rusty's grave. A small flag fluttered atop it, the same one I had planted after the memorial. In that silent, still moment, I saw his silhouette, Rusty, darting through the trees, turning to look back at me, tail wagging, stick in mouth, smiling the way only I would understand. No, Rusty wasn't dead. He just went ahead of me, scouting the trail like he always did, through mines and gunfire and fear. And one day, when I've walked my last mile, I know he'll be there waiting, tail thumping, ready to lead me home.